So, the Star Wars Unlimited Galactic Championships, the first one in history, is now over. So, we've now got the opportunity to take a step back, take a breath, and review all of the action with what happened. What decks made it, what decks overperformed, what decks underperformed, and what is potentially next for the future of the game. That is exactly what we are going to dive into in this video. My name is Ben Fitzpatrick, I'm a TCG caster, and that just means I love talking about them. Let's do that right now. But before we go ahead and jump into today's video, if you do enjoy it and you enjoy Star Wars Unlimited content, please go ahead and drop a like rating on it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, which I know over 95% of you that watch these videos aren't doing so. If you're coming back on the regular, might as well subscribe. It's completely free to do so. You can unsub at any time. But why would you want to? It's so great over here when we're talking about Star Wars Unlimited and other card game content. While you're down there in the description, the top link will be a link to my link tree where you can see me on all other platforms as well as X. Again, thank you for 350 followers over on the platform. So, let's talk Star Wars Unlimited. Let's talk the Galactic Championships. And first off, offer our congratulations to Beton Filip Skularek from Poland, who is our first ever Star Wars Unlimited Galactic Champion with Mother Tolzin Aggression. One of the 5 decks that we said that we would need to keep an eye out for in the Galactic Championships last weekend. Video in the iCard in the corner of the video here to see just what we were talking about, and it's rung true. This aggression, villainy, vigilance, force, tribal package winning the Galactic Championships against Kylo Ren Tarkin Town, which was not a deck that was on my radar whatsoever, and 2 of them ended up making it into the top 4, with the other one being piloted by David Hoyland from the United Kingdom. So a massive, massive congratulations to him and to Ian as well, who was the Galactics runner-up. Ophir Marom piloting Quinlan Tarkin Town, one of the more known quantities, in at 3rd place. 5th and 6th both going to Han Solo Worth the Risk Vigilance, the Force package there being used by both Joshua and Mikhail. Then one of the surprises of the tournament, Han Solo Never Tell Me the Odds with Tarkin Town. So Pilot Han from Jump to Lightseed Spotlight deck making it into the top 8 of the Galactic Championships. And Matthew Jakobina in with Pilot Vader Cunning as the final deck that made it in top 8. We're going to go through all of the deck lists throughout this video as well to kind of see what the strategies were and any of those cool tech inclusions that were there as well. Let's start that off with our winner's deck, Filip Skularek on Mother Tolzin Stranded Cliffs, that Force Aggression base. And there's not too many surprises that are in this list. You've got the general Force package that you're looking for here. Things like Darth Tyrannus, Grand Inquisitor, Jedi in Hiding, Karis, Night Sister Warrior, Secretive Sage, Tolzin's Assassins. There's a lot of sort of your general kind of inclusions that we've got in this build. However, there are a couple of innovations. The 2 copies of the 5-cost Kiadi Mundi is a very, very cool card, which coordinate when an opponent plays their 2nd card each phase, allows you to draw 2. Very, very cool. We've also got the Purge Trooper here, which when played can deal 2 damage to a Force unit. Very, very good call in terms of the meta and what Filip and his team, Team Enigma, were looking at seeing a lot of in the format. There was a lot of hype around that Han Solo Worth the Risk Vigilance and that Force package that it was running, so we might as well play a way to try and help take advantage of the damage that the Han Solo Leader effect is doing to get those units out earlier and clear the way of them while being on a 4-2 body. I really, really like this inclusion. 2 copies of the Sun, maybe a little bit different in terms of just the pure ratio numbers there. Armed to the Teeth is a really cool inclusion. A 2-cost upgrade that is a +2 but gains on attack, you can give another friendly unit +2 for this phase, and you can play it out of the smuggle for 4. So it's usually a pretty easy card to resource away, and then play it out from the smuggle, catch your opponent napping, and swing in for some big damage, as does the 2 copies of the Hotshot DL44 Blaster. The only difference here is that obviously when it's played out from the smuggle, it gains the cunning aspect here, so does have to pay 5 resources when it gets played out of the smuggle. But we saw in the grand final, link to the video in the iCard there to see that one, it doesn't really matter whether you're playing 3 or 5 resources for it. Attacking for an extra 2 in the same action with surprise is a very, very helpful resource indeed. The sideboard, pretty standard, apart from maybe the Kiadi Mundis here, the Heroism Aggression version from Legends of the Force, but that's primarily in here to help activate the Champion of Mortis Anakin to get that full instance of the 2 -3/-3s activated. We did see, however, in the grand final, it get used for the draw effect to pay for 6, use the Force, draw 2 cards, then attack with another Force unit, and immediately get the token back with the Strangle Glyphs. A very, very great, good deck, a very, very strong build, and a worthy win indeed. Let's go over to the runner-up now with Kylo Ren. We're not done yet with Tarkin Town. We don't need to say too much about the base choice. Tarkin Town has been a very, very strong base for quite some time now. But this is a really, really interesting deck and a really, really interesting build. You've got things that we've seen a lot of already so far. Anakin, Champion of Mortis, Karim, Secretive Sage. Witch of the Mist in here as well as a 1/3 with the hidden keyword. Force Throw, Force Lightning as well, Hotshot Blaster, Fallen Lightsaber. Those are a little bit more standard across most aggression and villainy decks. But then you get into some of the more engine-specific cards. You've got Migs Mayfield here, which is a really, really cool card when it's paired with Force Throw, because Force Throw makes you discard a card from hand as the primary effect of the card. The damage is only conditional if you control a Force unit. So when you Force Throw with Migs Mayfield out on the board, whenever any player discards a card from their hand, so whether it's Force Throwing yourself late game or Force Throwing your opponent early game to get that hand control, you can ping for 2 onto unit or base. Very, very good card in the early game. Combined with that, we've also got Pillage, force 2 cards to discard out from hand. Power of the Dark Side as some traditional Vigilance Villainy removal. Then we get in to all of the upgrades that are in this deck, which Kylo Ren, remember, as soon as it deploys on its leader unit side, can attach any number of upgrades from the discard pile onto itself, as long as you can pay all of the costs for them. So we've got 2 copies of Battle Fury here, which is a very interesting inclusion from Legends of the Force. +3/+3, on attack, discard a card from your hand, so can trigger Migs Mayfield. Constructed Lightsaber is a big card in this deck, because if it gets attached onto the Kylo Ren leader unit, which is a Force unit, it's villainy, so gets raid 2, and is that +2/+3, and it's not unique, so you can stack multiple instances of them on it. Fallen Lightsaber, we've spoken about already, obviously being a lot of Force units running around in the format at the moment. That on-attack ability is going to activate more often than not. Heroic Resolve is primarily in here to help boost up the Anakin Skywalker Champion of Mortis, but can be an extra little ability to go ahead and get +4/+0 and Overwhelm on an attack if you get that still on the board when it goes to your next action. Hotshot DL44 Blaster, again, we've seen that be a powerhouse in the format so far, in historical formats as well. Infiltrator's Skill is a very interesting one, has Saboteur, so is targeting some more of those Sentinel heavy decks that are in the format right now. Perilous Position, more of a control piece. Sith Holocron, which on attack can deal 2 damage to a friendly unit and get a +2 attacks boost during that swing. And then Snapshot Reflexes is one I really, really like, because even though you're paying the aspect penalty for it, paying 3, if you attach it onto your Kylo Ren leader unit, you are attacking with this Voltron leader immediately in that same action. It's a big action economy tool that we've got here that you can discard away early with the Kylo Ren leader effect. In terms of the sideboard here, pretty standard. Shamsindula in here for the ramp style strategies. Devastators in here just if the game's going to go nice and long. Pretty similar with Ruthless Raider. Grenade Strike is dealing with more of those kind of token and swarmy decks. Open Fire is just some spot burn, and then Rivals Fall as spot removal. Then we go into the only Quinlan Tarkintown deck that made its way into top 8, which is pretty surprising considering how strong Quinlan Tarkintown was in the Jump to Lightspeed meta. But this deck hasn't really gained too much, hasn't really changed at all. We've got a lot of the typical offenders here. We've got Ahsoka Tano, we've got Cassian that can be smuggled out and played in ready, Gorilla Soldier, which can be readied if your indirect damage is going into base, Han Solo with Ambush, L337, Plo Koon that can ambush with Raid 3 if you've got Coordinate live, Kira for hand disruption, Sabine Wren for early pressure along with Green Squadron A-Wing, Millennium Falcon, Red 5 disabling Fang Fighter to target upgrade decks, again, Force Throw, Spark of Rebellion, Surprise Strikes, Hotshot Blasters. Those are the repeat offenders, the usual kind of cards that we get. In terms of cards that have been brought in from Legends of the Force, we've got Adigalia as a 2/4 that burns 1 for base anytime your opponent plays an event. Not bad at all. We've got Depa Bilaba, which is a 6-cost 5/7 that has Ambush and Saboteur, so it can get around any Sentinels that are on the board. And then we've got Quinlan Voss, a 4-cost mono aggression unit, which on attack, if this unit has 6 or more power, can just burn 2 into the enemy's base. So looking for something like a Hotshot DL44 Blaster to pair along with it out of the Smuggle, or Surprise Strike as your main damage modifiers in the deck. Then we go into the sideboard. Again, pretty standard. An extra copy of Millennium Falcon, Bamboozles in here, Bombing Run to deal with the token decks, an extra copy of Spark of Rebellion, and then 2 copies of Waylay. But the really cool card in here is Aggrieved Parliamentarian. An Aggrieved Parliamentarian is in here to try and help target some of those decks that are wanting to put cards back in to the deck. It essentially, pretty sure off the top of my head, puts cards from the discard pile back in. Yeah, so Aggrieved Parliamentarian, when played, chooses an opponent. They shuffle their entire discard pile and put it on the bottom of the deck. So it's targeting things like Kylo Ren, because you're putting all of the upgrades that they've just put into the bin straight onto the bottom of the deck, and making it a lot harder for them to quite happily deploy their Kylo Ren leader unit. Also kind of targets some more of the sort of mill and control strategies, because it's shuffling the entire discard pile to the bottom of the deck. It's not more selective like it would be if you were using, say, a restock. So Aggrieved Parliamentarian kind of helps with that. Forces all of the cards to go back in. You don't know the order in which they're going to be going in, and if you're milling yourself out or working quite hard to get through your own deck, find some more of those key control pieces, you can just put them all straight back on the bottom. Obviously for yourself, hope that you've not been hit with, say, double vigilance to mill 10 cards out of your own deck by that point, and take the game from there. But I really, really like the inclusion of Aggrieved Parliamentarian, especially if it looks like we're going to be seeing more Kylo Rens in the future, which, if the top 8 is anything to go off of, we are, because this is the list from David Hoyland's Kylo Ren Tarkintown, and honestly, it's pretty similar. There's not really anything that jumps out to me that's immediately different between the two decks. You've still got the core of Admiral Moti, Anakin Skywalker, Karras, Lompic, Migs Mayfield in terms of units. Still got the core events, Force Lightning, Force Throw, Pillage, and Power, the dark side, and then all of the upgrades are pretty much the same. The only difference here, I think, is seeing Disabling Fang Fighter in the sideboard. Those were devastators when it came to Ian's deck build, and I think that is basically it. The 50-card main deck is exactly the same. There might just be a little bit of difference in terms of ratios in the main deck. But, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That is the approach that we've taken here, it looks like, with this Kylo Ren Tarkin Town. Now we'll get on to one of the decks that everyone was expecting to do very, very well this weekend, and one of the decks that a lot of people were targeting, and that is Han Solo Worth the Risk, Shadowed Undercity Force base. Whenever a friendly Force unit attacks, generate the Force tokens. So in here, of course, we've got cards like Champion of Orders Anakin. We've got Chewbacca in here, which can be played either on its own, from Smuggle, or with the Han ability, dealing some damage and giving some grit stacks. Very, very nice indeed. We've got Ezra Bridger in here from Legends of the Force on attack. Can give an experience token to another creature or Spectre unit. There aren't too many Spectres that are left in the deck. The only other thing that this is really targeting is the Crate Dragons. And I know a lot of people were looking to potentially play Ogdo Bogdo in the list, but a lot of people that got to the top end of the weekend in the Galactic Championships of the opinion that Ogdo Bogdo is just too easy for Tarkin Town to run into and clear the way of. So we didn't see too many of those making their way into days 2 and 3. We've got Grogu here as well, one of the legendaries from Legends of the Force, the 1/6 hidden unit that can be played for 3 or played for 2 on the first action phase if you can't effect an action. You can heal up to 2 damage from a unit if you do deal that much damage to a unit. So an early sort of combo piece here with the Han Leader effect. Han Leader effect is dealing 2 damage to any unit you play with it. So why not just heal it up for free and burn things on our opponent's side of the board with this legendary Grogu. We've also got the Itinerant Warrior here, a 4/4 for 4 with Shielded, and on play can burn the Force token to restore 3 from your base. Very, very nice tempo. We spoke about Ki-Adi-Mundi in Philip Scudlarek's list. A little bit more at home here to be able to use the Force and draw 2. Can play it out on the second action phase as well for 3 resources with the Han effect. Crate Dragons and Luke Skywalkers, a little bit more expected from a Han Solo list, as are Yodas and Red 5s. Mace Windu, this is the new Mace Windu as well from Legends of the Force, 6/6 for 6 with Overwhelm, can burn for 4 on play if you Force. Sentinel Obi-Wan Kenobi is a very, very interesting inclusion, but does make sense when you've got this heavy Force package going in here. If it does get defeated, and give it 2 experience tokens to one of your other Force units, and then draw a card. Owen Lars is a very, very cool card, and we spoke in my Gundam card game video about how important top 5 searches are in certain card games. This is no exception. When defeated, search the top 5 cards of the deck for a Force unit, reveal it, and draw it. Great consistency indeed. We've got our Phase 1 play here with the Secretive Sage if we don't want to immediately use Han effect, or if we don't have a way to use Han effect. We've got 2 copies of the Daughter here as well. Whenever damage is dealt to your base, use the Force token and reduce that damage by 2, essentially, because you heal 2 damage from base. We've got Yaddle in here as well with Restore and on attack, giving all other Jedi units Restore 1 for the phase. Works nicely with things like Yoda, the Itinerant Warrior, Obi-Wan and Luke when we get to that point. And then to round off the units in the deck, we've got new Chirrut Imwe, a 4-cost 3/5 Sentinel. When it's attacked, you can use the Force and reduce the attacker's power by 2. In terms of the events, pretty event light in this deck, still keeping 3 copies of Force Throw because it is a powerhouse in the format at the moment. 1 copy of Rival's Fall to easily answer leader deployments, and 2 copies of The Force is With Me. Again, boost up those Force units that we've got in the deck now, give it a shield token, and attack with it in the same action. So a very, very good, well-rounded deck that is still definitely something to be watched out for in the remainder of the Legends of the Force format. In terms of the sideboard, one other copy of Chewbacca, one other copy of Obi-Wan Kenobi, one copy of Tech as well, if we want to start playing out from the Smuggle, one copy of the original Mace Windu, the 7 cost to ambush in, and if it defeats a unit, you can ready it. 3 copies of Bombing Run, again, looking against the token decks. 2 copies of Confiscate for upgrade hate, and then 1 extra potential Rivals Fall. So that is one of the Han Solo decks that made it through. What about the other one? There were 2 that made it in, and pretty similar to the Kylo Ren decks, I don't see really many differences in the main deck, and in this case, in the side deck. This is pretty much a card-for-card copy of the previous list in main deck and in sideboard. So really, really interesting to see that these decks have made it through, but couldn't quite push up to that top 4 echelon. We'll go over the last 2 decks quickly as well as these surprise factor decks, one of them being this Han Solo Pilot. Now, Han Solo Pilot is all about odd costs of cards. You reveal the top card of your deck and then attack with a unit. If the revealed card and that unit have differing odd costs, the unit you're attacking with gets a +1 boost. That's why you're seeing a lot of 1s, a lot of 3s, a lot of 5s here, and the only outlier being C-3PO, because you can get ready with that C-3PO effect with the Han Leader. You Han Leader, flip that top card, then the next action, use C-3PO, you know the cost of the card, so you can flip it and draw it. So what have we got going for us here? Obviously, with it being a pilot, it's quite a heavy space deck. We've got Cartel Turncoats, Crackshot V-Wings, the differing copies of the Millennium Falcons, or the 2 different 3 costs. Mining Guild TIE Fighter in here as well to help us draw some cards in the later game. Sanctioneer's Shuttle that can capture away a pesky Sentinel in space. Flywings, Wolfpack Escorts, this is quite standard. As is most of the ground units that we have here as well. We mentioned C-3PO, Cassian Andor, of course, when you played out from the Smuggle. Pilot Han Solo, which is cheaper when played with piloting and swings immediately. If it's attached to a Falcon, you can deal combat damage before the defender if you're swinging into a unit. Plo Koon we've talked about already, and then Poe Dameron as kind of one of your staple aggression, heroism ground units. The one thing that is quite unique here is Bo Shek. Bo Shek is a 3/4 for 3 if it's played on the ground, or grants +1/+2 for a pilot, which only costs 2, and when it's played as an upgrade, you mill 2, but return each one of those cards with an odd cost to your hand. And because we're playing so many cards with odd costs, 47 of them in fact, with the only 3 being C-3PO that aren't odd costs, it's pretty likely that this is essentially just an upgrade, mill 2, draw 2. Which is unreal. For 2 resources as well, is a very, very strong combination. I know it's not quite mill 2, draw 2, because it's not like in that order, but you draw the cards that you've milled. You see where I'm going with this. You know the score. But it is very, very good. I am very, very interested and very happy to potentially experiment with this card and with this combination. Last cards we've got in the deck, we've got 3 copies of Daring Raid, just as some extra potential base burn. Jam Communications as some hand knowledge and event hate. Never Tell Me the Odds, another interesting card that's in the list. Discard 3 cards from an opponent's deck and 3 from your deck. Deal damage to a unit equal to the number of cards with an odd cost discarded this way. So at worst case scenario, this is likely a pay 3, burn 3. But at best case scenario, this could be a pay 3, burn 6, which is really, really nice value. Then, of course, with us being such a space-heavy deck, we've got swoop downs in the main to be able to help mitigate some of those ground decks. Into the sideboard, we've got the Chewbacca pilot, which is really, really cool. Played out of Aspect, interestingly, but still very, very cool to give your unit, the pilots, a little bit of removal protection. Disabling Fang Fighters for upgrade hate. Jedi Starfighters, Radiant 7, extra copy, just a copy of Bamboozle, and then extra copies of Jam Communications and Never Tell Me the Odds. I'm really, really happy that we have some decks like this that made it into the top 8 in the Galactic Championships. Still goes to show that there is a lot of room for ingenuity and experimentation in the format right now, and it's not just dominated by your top 3-4 decks or so. One of those decks, just maybe teetering on the edge of it though, is the Darth Vader Victor Squadron Leader Pilot with Jabba's Palace. And in terms of the main deck for this list, it hasn't really changed at all with Legends of the Force. The only thing you've got in here is Forged Starfighter as a 1/1 hidden with Raid 1, so it's a 2/1 when it attacks. But for the most part, it is just cheap space units, play solely into the space, create a load of TIE Fighter tokens, and try and win ideally before your opponent deploys their leader, closing the game out with things like Clone Combat Squadron or Victor Leader to just boost up all of your space units on the board. We've also got, in terms of events, to help stow the bleeding on the ground arena, we've got No Good to Me Dead, Outmaneuver as well, to just completely shut down the ground arena for a phase, and then Waylays to bounce some stuff back into our opponent's hand. In terms of the side deck, we've got 3 copies of the Scimitar, which is a new inclusion from Legends of the Force. Gets an attack boost if this unit is damaged. 1 extra copy of the Shuttle ST-149. 2 more Stolen AT Haulers. 2 Confiscates to defeat upgrade decks. And then 2 copies of Swoop Down, again, if we're playing into a more ground-focused strategy. So, those are the top 8 decks and the lists of which that made it through into the first ever Star Wars Unlimited Galactic Championships. And a massive congratulations to all players that played in this weekend to get that far. But what does that mean, and what did it look like in days 2 and 3? Because, of course, on day 2, we had all the players coming in that earned day 1 buys from qualifications of either planetary qualifiers, sector qualifiers, or regional qualifiers, as well as the players that did well enough in the open day 1, is going to be changing going into Season 1 next year, which we'll talk about in a little bit. These were the decks that made it into day 2. Obviously, a very, very heavy share on Han Solo Worth the Risk with Vigilance, and then Mother Tolzin quite a way behind it in second with 42. But I'm looking at the decks that were noticeably absent, and you'll continue through into day 3's statistics here in day 2. Things like Sabine ECL, Cad Bane Tarkintown, Anakin Skywalker with a Vigilance Force token base, as opposed to Anakin Skywalker with Colossus, which is what we've been used to seeing. That and Data Vault if we're pairing it with Command. Yoda Aggression Force base is a very interesting one to me that peeked through in the top few decks of day 2, and as well as Kylo Ren Tarkintown having only 14 decks in day 2, getting it to day 3, and you have 2 of them in top 4. That is really, really interesting, as well as some of the other decks that we've got here. Gar Saxon with ECL. That's interesting to me, considering the amount of Gar Saxon cunning that there was running around in the Jump to Lightspeed format. Then you've got some more of the hard control decks. Kira Data Vault, Emperor Palpatine with cunning, Emperor Palpatine with Colossus, Grand Admiral Thrawn with Data Vault as well. And then some more of the unique decks coming down here to end off day 2. Then compare that with day 3. We had 130 Han Solo Worth the Risk Vigilance decks that started day 2. Only 12 of them made it into day 3. That is a massive, massive cut down here, and probably attests to the amount of targeting that was going onto that deck. You then have Sabine Wren jumping up into the second most represented deck, going into day 3 with 8 decks. Sabine ECL, noticeably absent though in top cut. Kylo Ren Tarkintown with the 6 decks that made it, 2 going into top 4. Quinlan Tarkintown, only 1 of the 5 made it into top 8. Mother Tolzin, which was the deck that ended up winning the event. And then all of the decks, apart from the one Darth Vader Victor Legion Squadron Cunning Base that completely whiffed on any top 8 placements, Cad Bane Tarkintown, Anakin Vigilance Force Token, Iden Data Vault, and Emperor Palpatine with Cunning. Very interesting that it's with Cunning that had the most success, and not Palpatine with Vigilance, is what we have most seen. See. Some of the other cool one-off decks that I want to shout out here as well while at this point. One Yoda Sensing Darkness Aggression Force Token base made it through. Obviously the Pilot Hand that made it all the way to top 8. A Flip Palpatine, which is really, really cool. I'm always a big fan of Flip Palp. I know a Mr. Pierre Lemasson, who is very, very happy that Boba Fett Pilot with Data Vault made it through with 2 decks there on day 3. He's a very, very big proponent of the Data Vault version as opposed to the Cunning version. I still like the Cunning version, sorry Pierre. And then some more of the one-offs. Kazuda Shiono with Tarkintown, Mono Aggression Kylo 1 with Tarkintown, Hero of Yavin Luke with Data Vault, and a Pre-Vizsla deck with a 30 HP Vigilance base. That is a very, very interesting one-of indeed. So, that's how things ended at the end of the Galactic Championships. Where are we going to go from here? We're going to have a fresh round of planetary qualifiers and store showdowns to dive into very, very soon. So what's going to happen to the format now? Are people going to copycat and jump onto the Mother Tolzin list as well as the Kylo Ren? Are we still going to see a heavy representation for Han Solo? I think that we are still going to see quite a heavy representation for Han Solo. I think it's still a very, very good deck, and one that a lot of players that are seasoned to the game might have had quite a lot of time on now by this point. So I don't see the representation of Han Solo worth the risk coming down anytime soon. I do, however, see Tolzin and Kylo jumping up in numbers. So potentially that leaves the window for Sabine to continue to do well, just as the aggressive deck, just try and get through things all as possible. But realistically, we're still in the early days of the format, and there is the potential of there being another suspension update. There was an interview with one of the designers throughout the weekend, and the questions was posed to them about cards like Force Throw, leaders like Han Solo worth the risk, and about whether any action was going to be taken with these leaders and cards respectively. And of course the developer was very sheepish, was very, oh, well, we'll see what the results are at the end of the weekend to then make any decisions on suspension or anything. I'm not 100% sure if suspension is going to happen. We might see our first restriction potentially with Force Throw. The ratios of Force Throw might get cut to 1, maybe, just to try and help things go along a little bit more. But I'm not 100% sure that a full suspension is coming, especially quite soon, or at least relatively soon, after we had the suspensions to Django Leader, Triple Dark Raid, and the DJ unit as well. We could see some of those cards get reintroduced into the format. You never know what could happen. Whatever does happen, though, we'll be sure to cover it as soon as possible on the channel. So, that is going to be the end of the video, and it means that it is over to you. What did you think of the Galactic Championships, and where do you think that the Star Wars Unlimited meta is heading, going through the remainder of Legends of the Force and into the next set that has been previewed for November, Secrets of Power? If you have enjoyed this video as well, please be sure to drop a like rating on it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on those notifications so you do not miss an upload. that's going to draw an end to today's video then. I hope you have enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Goodbye for now.